you and thank you for coming to the Brookline Can Election Forum, co-sponsored with the Senior Center. I'm Melissa Trevette, and I'll be moderating the forum today. Some of you may not be familiar with the Brookline Community Aging Network, so I want to tell you a little bit about Brookline Can first. Brookline Can is a membership organization. It's run by volunteers. We work together to provide information and programs designed to ensure that all of us have the support we need to remain engaged in the life of the community and to advocate for our needs. One example of this is the election forum that you're attending today. So please stop by our table in the back as you leave and add your voice to the voice of Brookline Can. And we will go straight into the talking with the candidates for the select board. And the candidates, there are 4 candidates for 2 seats. And the candidates for select board are Bernard W. Green, Nancy S. Heller, Richard Nangle, and Donnell S. O'Neill Sr. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. And I want to just let you know that Carol Siebert will be the timekeeper for you. And it will really be very helpful if not only the candidates, but also the questioners keep within the times that we're setting up. That'll enable us to move efficiently through this, and many more people will get a chance to ask a question. We have asked the candidates to speak in reverse ballot order for their opening statements. And Carol will give a signal to you all when you're at the 30-second mark, and then the next sign you'll see will be the stop sign. So please pay attention to that. So Donnell, will you please start?
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you. Thank you. Hello, my name is Donnell O'Neill Sr. I'm asking for your vote May 8th, Tuesday, May 8th, for a number of reasons. Select board members who, in addition to being leaders of our town, also bridges for all citizens and residents of all age, color. They're supposed to represent everyone. You know, I feel there are some citizens out here that feel excluded from the policies and procedures of the town, and I feel that the inclusion process needs to be a little bit better. I've lived in Brookline Village for about 38 years. I went to Brookline Public Schools, from Lynch preschool to St. Mary's, to Pierce, to Brookline High School. I worked for the Brookline DPW for almost a decade, and I resigned and I started working for Spartan Rehab Hospital in Cambridge on the pulmonary unit in nursing. I've been disappointed for too long on how the incumbents have badly managed some of our communities, you know, tough situations and tough issues. The select board, I feel, could concentrate a little bit more on the human resource and human services department. 1% of the budget is allocated to human services and human resources, which I think is ridiculous. I would suggest, just a little to start to help to show good faith, that a little bit of the marijuana revenue that's coming would be allocated to at least 2 bus drivers for the senior center, so people can get around. So, you know, I feel will have a more positive impact on the select board than these 2 incumbents have shown these last 3 years. Point blank. Please vote for me May 8th. Thank you.
Thanks. And now, Richard Nangle.
My name is Richard Nangle. I'm a town meeting member, former reporter with the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. I started the union representing the employees there, and I have been a member of the Green Caucus and the Green Space Alliance, and I believe I'm the most progressive candidate in this race. I want to talk about having been a unpaid caregiver, obviously, in my home from different times from 1991 until 2016. First for my grandfather and my grandmother, later for my mother in 2008 and 9, and later for my mother-in-law 2012 to 2016. My wife is an adult gerontology nurse practitioner and the program director of adult gerontology programs at Boston College School of Nursing. Our family was very lucky to have the level of care that it received. You've seen and experienced firsthand what the hidden senior looks like. While our senior center and the people dedicated to it making it terrific are amazing, there are many seniors who are homebound and for a variety of reasons do not and cannot access the services. There are 75 million baby boomers who are on the verge of retirement, and for the next 20 years, an average of 10,000 people each day will reach the age of 65. We need to balance the needs of our whole community. While we want good schools, we also want excellence in our attention to all seniors, not just those that can access the senior center, but those who cannot. Social isolation and loneliness is the #1 problem facing many seniors. How do we change this? How can we be creative? I'll be talking more about these issues, and I ask for your vote on May 8th.
Thank you. Nancy Heller.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Heller. I am a select board member. I was elected in 2015, and I know many of you from many years ago when I was on the school committee and in town meeting and the advisory committee as well. So I've been involved in these issues a long time, and I've been involved in senior issues a long time, even though I wasn't a senior when I first got involved in them. Now I am, as you can see. Let's focus on what the seniors' needs today are. And I'll talk first about housing. This is a really tough issue because we rely on developers to tell us where they will build a housing development. But we're very fortunate in that JCHE, the Jewish Community Center for the Elderly, is going to be building a lovely building on Harbor Street. In addition, and the select board was very enthusiastic about this project, and it's gone through the process. In addition, the select board has also supported a project on Kent Street, which would build senior housing over the Kent Street parking lot, and we've just gotten that process started. I believe that today is the day that we should have received some proposals about it. You will hear a lot more about that in the future. Space in the senior center. The senior center is very fortunately very crowded. It reminds me of our schools, and we should do whatever we can to expand it. As co-chair of Age Friendly Cities and also a representative to the Council on Aging from the Select Board, I've talked about these issues in those bodies, and with Ruth Ann Dobek, who's as you know, our lovely chair of lovely executive director of the Senior Center. And there are some schemes that have, oops, I have to stop.
I'm sure there'll be questions on both of those.
Okay, I would love to talk about other issues, but I'll stop now.
Bernard Green.
Good afternoon. Just in case I run my time, May 8th, please vote for Bernard Green for re-election to the Select Board. Nancy and I were elected in 2015. We worked well together, and we'd like to return to the Select Board to continue the excellent work that we've been doing. I consider myself a progressive candidate, but a thoughtful progressive, and since 2015, the work that we've done on the Select Board suggests I'm also an effective progressive, which is more important than just the word progressive. The issues that the Brookline Community Aging networks have identified as priorities are on the minds of seniors and other people in the community, and they expect the town to provide the services and programs to address those issues, those priorities. Brookline's town government has been addressing those priorities and services in abundance since I've been on board as well as before. We pay for those services from various sources, property taxes being one, but we really aggressively go after other sources of money, whether it's federal or state grants, local option sales taxes, user fees, community contributions, and other things in order to keep property taxes down, which I know everyone is concerned about given that we have a override on the ballot. I want to advocate for that override. 30 seconds. Blah, 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 blah. The board is very well aware of the fact that people are concerned about the cost of the override. And we have been doing many, many things, and town government has been doing many things to try to reduce the impact of taxes on especially seniors, but also the community generally. When looking at a candidate for select board, you must ask yourself who has the temperament, the abilities, and willingness to work collaboratively on the board and within the community to implement programs that address the needs of seniors and others, but also to do the long-term thinking and long-term planning that's necessary to actually implement those programs and initiatives. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move into the, thank you for all your opening statements. And now we'll move into the questions segment. And the format for this will be that we'd like for people to raise their hands, and when you're called on, please identify yourself when you ask your question. And also, please keep your question short, no more than 30 seconds. So this will, and to make it a little easier for you to come up with something within that time frame, the first two questions will be asked by Brookline CAN members, and they'll be on key senior issues. The first one will come from Jerry Foyer.
Hi, Jerry Foyer, Precinct 3.
I don't think...
In the next 15 years, the senior population in Brookline is expected to grow by 30%. Our senior center is already at capacity, in need of increased space for the Council on Aging and additional programming. At present, funding is inadequate to pay for expanded hours and days of operation. What plans can you offer to help with this increasing need in our town?
Now, each candidate will have a minute, so this will be a challenge to respond. And we'll start with Mr. Nagel.
Oh, it's a very good question. The seniors that I cared for in my family, the chances of getting any of them to ever go to a senior center was 0. And yet I recognize that you want for people to go to a senior center. This senior center is well located for part of the town. Where I live, over on the other side of town, South Brookline, we could use a branch senior center just like we have a branch library. That would be a very good thing. It's pertinent to note at this time that Brookline is made up of many sectors right now. One sector is the median family income of couples with dependent children. That's $197,000. Then we have our median family income of $144,000, a median household income of $96,000, a median income among older women living alone, $32,000. And so,
Mr. Nagel.
well, okay.
So come back to someone else. I'm sure we'll come back to that question. There'll be another opportunity. Ms. Heller.
The senior center expansion, I think is a critical issue for our town, and we should focus on it. One of the things that we can do, and I hope we will do more of, is to strongly encourage in whatever ways we can, depending upon the development, of community rooms that are an extension of the senior center in various housing projects that are around town. The other thing, I think, is that we would try to partner with the 100 Center Street and 112 Center Street to where we're really on the other side of them, partner with them to find a way to expand this center out toward the back. And I know Nancy Daly has been working on that. It's a significant problem, but it may be that we could do some programming in other places in town, including town hall, maybe in some of the schools. We can utilize some of the spaces that exist there. The question then becomes transportation. I have to stop, we'll get back to that. Thank you.
Mr. Green.
Well, senior center, I think that we need to begin a process of planning for long-term needs. Facilities planning would be one piece of it, and we're already doing some of that. I think we also have to begin planning for innovative ways of serving the senior citizens of this town. And like Mr. Nangle said, there are many citizens, seniors who live far from the senior center. So we have to think of innovative ways to service those people through senior center programming. Whether that means satellite programs at, for example, the new 9th school or 9th grade facility at the high school, which is going to have some community space. We should think about whether that is an appropriate place to have some certain senior programs. You have the opportunity to develop good intergenerational relationships and programming if you do that. Transportation, of course, becomes a big issue, and like everything else, it's all related to the solution of this problem. So those are my thoughts, and I stop before you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill, when the mic gets to you.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Jerry, for the question. It's a great question. So I feel expansion of the senior center would be a great opportunity for the seniors all around town. But the major issue is getting to the senior center. So I feel transportation is a focus, is something that we need to focus on. Like I stated earlier, that human resources department only receives 1% of our marvelous budget. So more focus on increasing the budget for the Council on Aging, I think would help, at least with a study, would help the transportation issue for the seniors around town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next question of Alex Beck.
Hi, my name is Alex Beck, Precinct 3. I'm a retired social worker. I guess I'd like to know, although Ms. Heller, you did touch on it a little bit, I'd like to know what more can be done to increase the supply of truly affordable housing, given the coming swell of aging boomers and the already present Brookline older seniors.
Let's start with
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough problem because the people who develop these buildings don't really want to do affordable housing. They want to do housing that they make a lot more money on. So we have to find ways to insist that they do carry out our mandate in our zoning bylaw of 15% of the units being affordable. And I believe we've begun to be talking in our some of the committees about this issue. I, for one, would favor upping that zoning bylaw restriction to 20%, because if we don't, we will never manage to keep up with the need. I mean, I'm not even sure we can because it is so extensive, but we have to try, and one of the ways to do that is to increase the percentage. Now, in 40Bs, the percentage is already 20%, but the problem with 40Bs is then the developers try to have for the other 80%, they insist on rents of $11,000 a month.
We have to stop now. Yeah, Mr. Green.
Okay, there are two issues here. Number one, things we can do to avoid reducing housing for seniors. And number two, things we can do to increase affordable housing for seniors. In that first category are things like addressing the very difficult, almost insurmountable problem of rising taxes that are burdening people and are a necessary part of living in Massachusetts. They can't deny that. And also addressing the rental, the rising in rents that we have here in Brookline, partially due to the luxury 40B developments that are coming up here in Brookline. For example, $11,000 for 3-bedroom apartment on the project near Coolidge Corner. As an example, jacks up rents for everyone, takes away housing opportunities for both seniors as well as other people. In terms of increasing the availability, we have a land bank warrant article at town meeting, which is going to be helpful, and we also have been looking at ways to use existing land that the town owns for innovative developments for seniors and other housing
Thank you very
users.
much for your comments. Actually, I'm going to,
Sorry.
I was going to see if I could split this mic between the two of you.
Thank you.
And we'll just see how that goes. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you, Alec, for the question. So I work for Spalding Rehab Hospital in Cambridge on the pulmonary unit. And part of my job as a CNA on the pulmonary unit is to get people dressed every day, get them up and out, and get their physical therapy done. The hardest part of my job is when people are leaving is where are they going to go? What facilities are there that are there for the elders and seniors who want to live independently? It's tough. It's hard. I feel what the select board has done already in regards to the Kent Street parking lots and all that, and the 450 units they put aside for disabled and the elderly is helpful. So my suggestion is any new development that come about in town, we need to push that they will have space for the seniors who want to live independently in town. Thank you.
Not a problem. Let me finish my last answer first. We ought to forge some liaisons with the many great universities, with those with senior studies such as BC, UMass Boston, to seek grant funding and support seniors in all pockets of town. As for this question, I don't want to see Band-Aid approaches to something that deserves a larger approach. We need to negotiate with developers to build real affordable housing in this town, and not just the fake 40B affordable housing that really is not available to people who live on the margins. The tax increases that are coming down the road are going to make it more difficult for seniors especially to live in their homes. And so we have to make a decision on what it is that we want to do in this community. And I say we do not build a ninth school. We should expand the Pierce School instead because it needs the work and we can expand there, and then address the structural deficit to avoid an override that otherwise is coming in 2021.
All right, now the floor is open for...
You're gonna do this, right?
Actually, I think they can do
Okay,
this. So
okay.
let's try and see how it works for
Very
you
well.
two to keep that. Floor is open for questions. There in the back, Jerry, all the way in the back.
Larry Oney and I, as a senior citizen living in Brookline, one of the things we all have common in this room is that we're all growing older, okay? So, the question I have is, for each of the panelists, what do you see as the state of race relations in Brookline in the present? Is it healthy?
Let's start with Mr. Green.
That's an interesting question. Compared to what is one way that we can answer that. Let me finish.
We consider ourselves exceptional, special, we're special and exceptional. So I'm not interested in measuring it
very, very good. And more importantly, we have the ability as well as the mindset to improve and address issues that come up in the community regarding race. We're fortunate because not all communities have that privilege, and that is the ability to engage in conversation and address issues regarding race, whether it's in the police department, whether it's regarding incidents at the high school or other places around town. So I think we're very, very good in that regard. I'm not going to claim that we are exceptional. Those are just words that people throw out. But we do a very, very good job, and we have the ability to do an even better job. So that's my answer.
Mr. Neal.
So I feel the town has more than just a race issue. We have like a human relationship issue throughout the whole town. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it goes past race. It's more, so this right here is the budget of the town. I'm going to continue to say this because I think this is part of the reason why we're going through what we're going through. There's only 1% of the budget goes to human resources and human services, and that's a major, major issue. So I thank you for your question, Larry, but it definitely goes past race. If we concentrate more and add more money to the budget for human resources and human services, I think it would make a difference in the change of the climate of this town.
Mr. Mann.
Brookline must work toward full diversity and inclusion at every level. The issue of racism in the community will only go away if we address it head on and in real time. While there is wide disagreement on whether Brookline has a race problem, there can be no disagreement that there is a perception that Brookline has a race problem. My goal in 3 years is for the perception of racism in our community to go away. It will only go away if we deal with issues that arise head on and in real time. And I will do that. I will not walk out of the room, nor will I take a vote under my breath. Brookline needs to be better than that.
Ms. Heller.
Brookline is a terrific place to live. And I've always said that we can make a terrific place even better. And in this area, we can do better. It's one of our challenges. I think we're far above many communities, but we will do better, and we have done better in the last few years. For one thing, the staff in town hall and in the school department is far more diverse than it was even a few years ago. We have worked on that. We have made sure that the staff, especially Select Board Member Green, has made sure that the staff understand that we want a diverse pool of candidates when we have openings. And we have succeeded in attracting a number of high-quality candidates, and that's obviously the first thing we want, is we want somebody to be qualified, but we're also able to really diversify our staff. In terms of community relations,
That's a good
sorry.
starting point. Maybe you can come back to that. Okay. All right. Now we're open for additional questions. So,
Judith Kidd, Precinct 2. I'm interested and have been, along with everyone else, in this lengthy process we've taken on trying to cite the next school. And I would like to hear your opinion on whether or not having two bodies that are working on selecting the school site, the select board and the school committee, is an efficient use of our time.
So, thank you, Judith. Question. So, the whole ninth school issue, I've had a problem with it from the beginning. The whole exploration process of it and going after Pine Manor is horrifying. Brookline didn't show any love to Pine Manor, and I feel that's not what Brookline's about. Pierce School needs work. I attended Pierce School. My oldest attends Pierce School. I think if anything needs to be done with any schools, it should be Pierce, renovating it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this nice fat pitch down the middle of the plate. This joint board, for the purposes of choosing a new school, might be unprecedented in Massachusetts. I don't know if it is. I certainly have asked every person I've ever worked with as a reporter whether they've seen this, whether they're a journalist or whether they're a town official. I've called the Mass Municipal Association, I've called the MSBA. I get no answers. You can't be accountable when you're a 5-member body and you take a 9-member body that is not part of the executive branch and you say, we're going to parcel out our work to you. You can help us choose a school. Look at the mistakes they've made. Look at the Baldwin school choice. The select board voted against Baldwin by a 3-2 margin. The school committee voted for it by a 6-3 margin, despite the fact that our town council said that this was going to be an extremely difficult process with Article 97. And this is just one example of why this board needs to be dissolved, and I would move to dissolve it.
Ms. Helen.
Clearly, the search for a ninth school is not an easy one. There's no perfect site and no perfect solution. But as in Brookline, the fact that we've had both the select board and the school committee involved in this process is really a reflection of what we do in our town. We have many citizens who weigh in on the issues. We've had lots of other people, and get much better involvement in our schools, our senior center, all of our committees and boards that we have. Our government is very citizen-focused. And I think the fact that we've had that process at the select board and school committee together means we get a wide range of views. We get people who are opposed or for a particular site based on certain factors, if they weigh more heavily than another person, but I think that's valuable information. We're continuing to move forward on the ninth school in the sense that we're looking for a site. And we want it to be as perfect as possible, but it probably will.
Ms. Heller. Let's go on to Mr. Green.
So, efficient use of 2 bodies. One of the things that is beneficial to having the school committee and the select board, that's better, involved in this process is that the school committee has certain expertise that the select board doesn't have. I used to be on a school board, so I know that there is a particular type of expertise you get from working on school issues that select board members may not have. So that enabled us to have more information, more and better information in terms of making our decisions as to where to locate, and other issues. Related to that, Pierce School needs fixing. It's now not handicap accessible to any significant degree. We need to fix that, absolutely. But we need a nice school. We can't be expanding in place into the hallways, onto the stage of the auditorium, into closets. That's just not going to work. We need a modern answer to this problem, and a nice school is that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Green. All right, now we have time for one question.
Just getting started.
Oh my gosh. Okay, my name is Janice Khan. I'm a town meeting member. I'm also on the advisory committee, so I would like to ask a financial question of the people running for a select board. So we are about to ask the voters of this town to support a general override. Like Nancy, I've now crossed into being a senior in this town, and I do worry about people who are facing more and more, or struggling more and more in this town as a result of aging in place, which I would like to be able to do. So my question is, the override is for $6.5 million. This is a general override. 5.8 is being dedicated to the schools. 700,000 to town services. And of that, the senior center is getting the third lowest, $37,000. And I just wonder about prioritizing in this town and whether we could do a better job. Thank you.
Let's start with Mr. Nagel. I can't say your name. Nagel.
As long as you can read it on the ballot. Thank you. Okay, the question is about the override, and the override is a problem. The fire department wasn't even asked to appear before the override study committee. A year ago, the select board was asked to put together an override study committee. It didn't do it until October. It moved very quickly. It's considered to be a sloppy document. The advisory committee said don't do this and went for a smaller override, what is unfortunately called a one-year override, because it isn't 1 year. An override is permanent, it always is. But if we had gone that route, we could have gone right back to the drawing board, had a better override study committee, and then do the thing that we really need to do and that we absolutely will do if I'm elected, which is to form a committee to go after the structural deficit and make the hard choices that have to be made so that we never have to have an override in this community ever again.
Ms. Heller.
Since Proposition 2.5 was enacted in the 80s, we've only gone to the voters a few times. But it's an important process because you have to understand that these structural deficits are caused by the fact that the 2.5% we're allowed to raise the levy by doesn't cover our cost. So every so often we have to go for an override. This particular override, the select board worked hard to get the number down. We've committed non-tax revenue, meaning parking fees, perhaps trash fees. We haven't specified that yet. Perhaps marijuana tax, perhaps some hotel taxes. We don't know yet because we don't really have a handle exactly on what that's going to be. But so we've worked to cut it down. We've worked to identify town needs and school needs. And the school needs, because the population has grown so enormously in the past several years, 40% in the elementary school, in the elementary schools, and that number is now reaching the high school. So we need to expand Brookline High in order to accommodate. We do not want to put kids in closets. We do not want to put them...
Thanks very much, Ms. Heller. And we'll come back to the
go on for a long time about this.
In the next segment. Mr. Green.
Well, I'm kind of shocked that someone would suggest that we never have an override in the future. To do that, we would have to get rid of our wage increases, get rid of our benefit increases, which are pretty much out of our control. And that is the source, one of the sources of the structural deficit that requires us to go back to the voters occasionally to increase the increase in property taxes. What we're trying and working very hard to minimize, and we've been successful in minimize the times we have to go to the voters for an override. We had one 3 years ago, and before that, it was, 5 years before that? Some towns have annual overrides. We don't do that. And we're able to not do that because the careful management of town resources and our ability to keep our budget low and not rising any further than it's required by wage increases and other mandatory increases.
Now, Mr.
Janice, thank you for the question. Aging in place is big for me. I would like, so it's not just a big issue for you guys sitting in a room, it's an issue for us 38-year-olds also. I would love to age in place here. I love this town, it's a wonderful place to live and grow up and ultimately pass away in. I feel, I say this because my mother, she decided to pass away at home. I was her caregiver, did the hospice, the whole nine for her in 2012. she wanted to pass away here. She didn't want to go anywhere. So I feel my mother on that, and I understand why. And I just feel the overrides are scary. I'm tired of voting yes for them, to be quite frankly with you. I'm just tired of it. We will have another revenue that's coming, and I'm don't stop.
It's a difficult topic, but
Yeah.
that will be the next segment.
Okay.
So anyway, that was our last question, and the select board candidates have said that they would have some time because it looked as if there were additional questions that we didn't have time to get to as a group. So they have all agreed that they'll go across the hall, and if you have, pardon me?
Closing statement.
Oh, thank you. I'll finish that, since I'm not looking at a timekeeper yet. But in any case, the candidates will be glad to do that, and so you'll be able to do that after they finish. And yes, we come to the closing statements, and then each candidate has a minute. And in this case, we'll go by ballot sequence. And that's, so we start with Mr. Green.
Thank you. And thank the audience for participating in this forum. As I've said on the campaign trail many times, I came into the select board office promising three things. The main thing, or four things, the main thing was that I would be a thoughtful and progressive select board member and think through issues carefully. And I think that I have 30 seconds. I have done that. And I urge you to vote for Bernard Green for re-election to the select board on May 8th of this year's town election. Thank you.
Ms. Heller.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming today. Please vote for Nancy Heller on Tuesday, May 8th. I have had a very long career of advocating for Brookline's citizens, including seniors. I joined town meeting in 1988, and the school committee for 12 years, advisory committee for several years, and now the select board. And I want to continue the advocacy and the dedication that I've brought to the table and ideas about how to move us forward, how to make a terrific town even better. And we can do better, there's no question. I'd be happy to talk to some of you in the back room over there as they're suggesting about the property tax relief issues, because I do think that they are significant. And I hope you will vote for me on Tuesday, May 8th. Thank you.
Mr. Nagel.
Please vote for me on May 8th in case I don't get to that. I've covered many communities as a reporter, some of which really should have passed overrides and didn't. They had school systems that needed help, and they made mistakes in not passing overrides. We're a different kind of town. I've never seen a community that celebrates overrides the way we do. An override is an admission that you can't manage your budget. And you've got to remember that. We had overrides in 1994, 2008, and now it's 15, 18, 21, that's failure. I want to close that I moved back home to be a caregiver for my grandparents. I understand the challenges that seniors face, and we need many outreach, senior-focused communities within neighborhoods that are creative and embedded where the seniors are. Thank you.
Mr.
So I've lived in Brookline, like I said, 38 years. I attended all the public schools here, high school, graduated here. I'm also the only candidate here who's actually worked for the town of Brookline, the DPW department. So I understand the grievance process in the HR department. That needs to be better. Much of my life has been about service to others. I had a wonderful mother, modeled my mother, who was a social worker for the Head Start program in Brookline. There needs to be a change in the way we address Brookline's human services and human resource departments. That change can start with me, start with you. I'd like to end with a quote from Edward Everett Hale. who is a Unitarian, was born in Boston and died in Roxbury, Mass, goes together. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. So if you vote for me, you will get social betterment and more moral and social improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. And we'll transition now while the candidates will go across the hall where they can engage with those of you who have additional questions. And we'll transition to the override and debt exclusion questions. So I want to introduce Susan Wolf-Ditkoff, a longtime member of the school committee on the far right, and Nancy Daly, a longtime select board member. They will speak on behalf of the override and debt exclusion proposals. They'll take about 10 minutes or less to speak on them, and then we'll have the rest of the time until 5:15 for questions. Go ahead. Pardon me? No, that's a question I expected to come up, and we discussed it. But there's no organized opposition. 2 years ago, when this forum was held, there was organized opposition, and they were speaking. But this year there isn't, so we have the two people speaking on behalf. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I always say, though, that there is a lot of inertia in getting people to vote to have their taxes go up. So I'm going to consider that the opposition on this. So I'm speaking a little bit on the general override question, and Susan is going to address the debt exclusion on the ballot. Basically, as you know, I think all of you know, Proposition 2.5 means the taxes for the town can only go up 2.5% over the prior year's net levy. And I cannot remember a year in which our health insurance costs, for instance, were below 2.5%. So year after year, there is pressure on the budget as the expenses are higher than 2.5%. And that is why we've had a couple of overrides. We have also a very particular problem in Brookline. You might call it a blessing, but it's an expensive one. We have had lots of families with young kids flocking here. And you know, our schools are renowned, and that's great, but you know, it is expensive. How do we accommodate everybody? And so the general override question that's going to go on the ballot is for $6,575,425. Of that, the big part, $5,873,000, goes for a school operating budget. The smaller part of $701,000 goes to the town operating budget. And I'll tell you, I'm, as many of you know, retired from the Board of Selectmen last May, but kept advocating, look, the town departments need some help too, because they've really been getting squeezed. And you know, I know Mr. Nangle said, why should we ever need any overrides? Well, the fact is, without overrides, you would have substantial cuts in services. That's just the way it is. As I say, there's a lot of the budget to do with benefits, and even legacy benefits of pensions, and as well as current health benefits. And you can't just say, I'm not going to pay that. You know, you're obligated to pay those expenses. So, how, you know, the only way we can manage all of this is periodically to come and say, okay, we need to go above the 2.5%. Please give us that authorization. We have had far fewer overrides than many other communities. I was looking at the list today, and some of them have smaller ones, but all the time. And we've gone for a few. This is our fourth general override that we are asking the public to pass. And it is, as I say, a lot of it has to do with, you know, how do we keep the excellence in public education, and that requires teachers for all these kids and school classrooms. Susan will be more addressing the debt exclusion is really for the building part. I realize it's tough when you're a senior, and my kids are long out of the schools. But I will say that the Brookline schools did very well by my children, and I feel like they got an excellent education, and they both went on to college, and then both of them did graduate school, and they said to me that college was actually not that difficult because Brookline High School had been so challenging. So it was, education for me is an important value. And as I say, my kids benefited from it, and I want to pay it forward. But I would also say on a more practical aspect, to justify this to seniors, that it is critically important to the value of your home. And for many of us, that's our big nest egg that we're counting on. And I will say that when in 2008, when a lot of property values were sliding, ours didn't really slide much in Brookline, and then they have, got back on their upward track again after that. So it's not quite money in your pocket today, but it's money in your pocket tomorrow by paying for good services. You do benefit it from it in terms of the value of your home. Am I going over, Susan? I think maybe it's your turn. I do have a little thing I'll hand out, and we'll tell you something about what this would actually mean for your taxes.
Good. Thank you, Nancy. My name is Susan Wolf-Ditkoff. I'm on the school committee, and I was the co-chair of the co-chair of the high school expansion project. Many of you know that the expansion project has been going on in depth for about a year. Nancy Heller, who was just here, was one of the co-chairs, as is George Cole from the Building Commission. We had a really terrific committee of people who were planning board members, architects, neighbors, abutters on Brington Road. We had a student representative all the way through, staff. Many advisory committee was represented, Bobby Nabel, who many of you know, who was a former dean of Tufts University, who just provided tremendous insight on a variety of dimensions, both from her town knowledge and also her knowledge of higher education. So it was a really diverse group. We had 17 people. We met every month, and we looked at many plans for the high school and how to accommodate the growth from 2,000 students to roughly, the capacity that we're building for is 2,700 students at the high school. There were 4 different options, and we picked, the lowest one does not even meet MSBA standards, state standards. There was a second one which met all of the standards, and then the third one was sort of the tricked out, beautiful high school that one might expect if you just sort of looked at a map and said, what kind of high school would Brookline have? Unfortunately, that third option was more than $350 million. And so we had that reaction, thank you. Thank you. That was the reaction we had, and we said, I don't think so, not even close. The second option, which met all the standards, did a full renovation of the high school, HVAC and all that, was still roughly $250 million. And we looked at that, and that actually is in range with the other high schools in the area that are going up. You'll see, I think, Lowell's at $350 million. There are a variety of ones that you'll see in the papers through the MSBA process. What we decided to do instead, and I think you probably have heard this by this point, is purchase a part, instead of trying to renovate the entire high school, we chose to purchase 111 Cypress Street, which is right adjacent to the high school. And then we have a plan to build over the tracks, and that building will have essentially a 700 student capacity, mostly focused on 9th graders, but also still very integrated into the look and feel of the building, of the entire building campus around Cypress Field. So the vision is kind of really exciting. We're thinking of Cypress Field as a civic green, if you will, and the architects have brought a lot of coherence to what that experience will look like for people who walk by, for people who go to the pool. My mother goes to the pool. She lives on Beacon Street. She goes to the pool with some of you. And just other people in the community, because it really is a civic campus. Town meeting uses the auditorium. Many civic groups use different parts of the campus. They're not handicap accessible, all of them right now. And so this notion of a beautiful civic green that really looks at all the different pieces together and says, how can we build in community spaces? How can we make sure that this is something that will work for the whole town? I mean, this high school, as the architects have noted, really is a town jewel. It's the town jewel, and people did not want to split it up. They didn't want to go to a 2 high school campus. So in a sense, this is a little bit of the best of both worlds because we are building one building to accommodate almost all of the growth. You get some of those cost advantages of not having to renovate the entire thing. However, we are going to keep it as one campus and one unified high school as the culture of Brookline. So let me just say two quick things.
Just a minute, because we want to save some time for questions.
Sure. Let me just say that, like the 3 major aspects of the project, and then you can go online. There's some pictures of it and everything. The major aspects are purchasing 111 Cypress Street and building over the tracks, which is smart growth, renovating the front and the entry to the pool area and the gym, tearing down and building a new science wing right on the corner of Tappan and Greenough, and then also renovating over the 3rd floor, the Schlunch gym classrooms. So happy to talk more about any of those details, but thank you so much for coming out here and learning more about it.
Good, thank you. Let's open up the floor for questions. Jerry, there's someone here.
I think it came up the last time, but I'll mention it again. The middle class in this town, middle class in this town, basically our income is going up by about 1% a year. And a lot of the school projects seem to be Cadillac projects. You're talking about for 700 students here, $250 million. That's almost $400,000 a student. If I were in private industry, I'd certainly be questioning the cost per student that you're doing. It seems like you're spending an awful lot of money on these school things without any cost control.
Excuse me, but did you have a question there?
Yeah, I mean, how did we get to such a high cost?
Okay.
If it's $400,000 a student, how did we get to such a high cost, and where's the cost control?
Sure. Absolutely. $250 million was the higher price point. We did not select that. We picked the $205 million price point. So it's much.
That's about $300,000 a student.
So it's much smaller than that. Well, but that is to benefit the entire campus.
Yeah.
And then that is the pool. It includes the pool, the gym, Cypress Field. There are many other pieces in that project that are not just about the students.
Well, that's to last for like 20 years. So you've got to figure not just the students that would use it the first year, but you've got to figure all the students that would use it over the 20-year period.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Ruth Ann.
I'm Ruth Ann Snyder. I'm in precinct 6. Nancy, I think you missed the point when you try and sell seniors. And those of us who, if I lived in another town, I'd actually be a very solid middle-class person. I was an elementary school teacher, and I made about $50,000 a year. I'm trying to remember what. And but if I live in Brookline today, the average income of a family with 2 children is $197,000. For mathematics, I'm rounded to $200,000. So I would have to work 4 years to make the salary of one person. I know I'm going too long, but it's really important. So I just think that you miss the point that I want things to progress here and go, but how do you think that people on fixed incomes can assume these large increases?
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if I have an answer for you, but I will try to comment. It's tough if you're living on a fixed income. There's no doubt about it. And there are a couple programs that are, one is a deferred tax program that you can work with the town, and they have lowered the interest rate on it to make it more attractive. So this is somewhat like taking out a reverse mortgage. If you say, I want to stay in my house, but I can't afford the taxes, you can defer the taxes, and that's one option.
Yeah, there are also new warrant articles, as you know, Ruth Ann, and so I would encourage everyone to look at them and see if there are ways to not only increase the awareness of them, but things like, are there different ways to do raise revenues and reduce the costs for seniors? And I think that over the long term, thinking about what role other revenues play, commercial development, there are other sources, is an important piece of that, because you're absolutely right. People need to have this be a town that they can continue to live in.
Okay, thanks. Jerry, yes, a question in the back.
Hi, hope you can hear me. David Aronson, town meeting member, precinct 3. We've talked a bit about the schools, which are obvious in need, but there's also almost 700,000 for the other parts of the town, and I know that a number of departments have had issues. But I wish you would discuss that.
I believe one of the items on there would be an additional social worker for the senior center. There's some money for the libraries. There is some snow equipment and street and sidewalk money in there, which is something I think is critical for all of us, but seniors in particular, to be getting around town. There's also some money for the recreation department, an aquatics position. I'm not sure exactly who they deal with, but whether it's kids or others. And the diversity and inclusion training, there's a little bit of money in there. Sustainability, the town is trying to be more green, and there's a little bit of money going to that. And that, I think, is the highlights.
Good, thank you. We have time, I think, for at least one more question. Okay. No other questions? Hi.
Hi.
Jerry.
I'm Lauren Bernard. Oh, thank you. Lauren Bernard, town meeting, precinct 8. This is a question on the override allocation for the schools. How much are you planning to spend at school level versus administrative, school department, superintendent department? Thank you.
So it's my understanding that the amount dedicated to the central office is less than 10%, that more than 90% is going to be building-based. So what that means is classroom teachers to keep classroom sizes low. It means there's social workers in here, ELL, nurses, special education. There's a financial assistance policy for students who can't pay fees for field trips and that sort of thing. There are pieces that go to essentially people in the buildings who help with, if there's a bullying incident, there's a program called Restorative Justice, which some of you may know, and we're beginning to invest much more heavily in that as a program, rather than if a kid, has a problem with another kid, you don't just expel them anymore. You really try to educate them as children. Their families are involved. The whole peer circle is involved, which frankly in this day and age is just more important than ever. There's a fair amount of additional, there's an allocation for when class sizes go over 25. There's additional paraprofessional money that's budgeted here. We know that paraprofessionals have always had a living wage on an hourly basis, but there's some money in here just to make that. It's a tough position to do, and we've been trying to prioritize funds for that as well. And then finally, there are a number of other special education things like response to intervention practices and 504 services, which is basically services for the general education population to prevent referrals to special education. So it's an intervention in the general population. So a variety of things, but overwhelmingly for the children and building-based programs.
Okay, thanks. Nancy, did you have anything short to add, or?
Sorry, was that too much information?
Do we have time for one more? Okay, one more question.
I wasn't going to ask the question. I'm Susan Granoff, town meeting member, precinct 7. But to follow up on what you were saying, Susan, You went into detail about the 90%, but could you describe how that 10% will be spent for the administrative costs? I believe that you're going to be hiring new administrators, and some of them will be paid about $140,000 each in salary.
Which one are you talking about?
The new, are you going to be hiring new administrators? The 10% of the revenue that you said would be going for administrative.
So some of the, well, so let me clarify. It kind of depends on how you define administrative. So for example, if you think about a vice principal, some people consider that administrative, but vice principals deal with students all day long. They deal with, again, discipline issues. They deal with either directly with teachers, working in, if they're in classrooms, they're around, it's about student safety. So even things that sound like quote unquote administration in a school, 90% of it is actually student facing. The other thing, just thank you for mentioning that, because the other thing that we did to bring costs down is we actually reduced some pieces of central administration. We've eliminated a communication specialist, which was really a difficult thing to do because people want lots of communication from the schools. We've eliminated some secretarial positions at the central office. So a number of those things are paying for themselves, if you will. They're covering themselves. The other thing that's happening is that we've looked for efficiencies in the central administration budget. So technology is a good example where we had, in the last override, we had talked about having an iPad program, having iPads for the students to use, and the teachers could figure out how they wanted to use them. What happened was that in the technology world moved so quickly that they were able to buy Chromebooks instead. Chromebooks are a fraction of the cost of iPads. So we used that savings and we allocated it towards other things, specifically salaries for teachers and other staff. And so part of this process, the central, just to answer your question about central administration, is about making it as lean as possible where we can and finding those efficiencies and reallocating that money. Unfortunately, in an era of nearly 40% growth in the K-8 schools, and they're all moving up, we're at 37% I think, and they're all moving up to the high school, it still needs more even with those efficiencies. So.
Okay, thanks very much to both of you.
And thank you for being a community that really does support both education and the excellence in town services.
Now, are there people who still have questions about the override and the debt exclusion? The reason I ask is that Nancy Daly has volunteered to go across the hall and be there if people would like to talk with her about this topic.
We've silenced the crowd.
Thanks very much. All right, now we'll transition to the school committee. There are 6 candidates for 3 seats on the school committee. The candidates from my left are Barbara Scotto, Jennifer Monopoly, David Perlman, Nathan Spritz, Sarah Stoutland, and James Swaine. And so really we'll follow the same format that we've been following before. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make a 2-minute opening statement, and we will do it in reverse of ballot order. And so the sequence will be, we'll start with James Swaine. And you will have to share the 2 mics.
Thank you all for coming. We, all of us, I know, really appreciate your participation. My name is Jim Swaine. I began teaching at the devotion school in 1977. I taught 3rd and 4th grade for 27 years there. I then, under the guidance of Jim Walsh, became a principal and was the principal of the Lawrence School for 3 years. In my time as a teacher, Brookline was it was known as the lighthouse community. And teachers were curriculum developers, they were innovative. We were nationally known for some of the programs we developed in the town. We actually created BEAT, Brookline Early Education Program. Facing History in Ourselves is taught all over the country. School Within a School, SWS. My daughter was lucky enough to be in that program, and it transformed her. Teachers to Scholars. And when I was at Devotion, I participated in something called the Brookline Teacher Researcher Seminar, which really developed me as a teacher. And so if I'm elected, and I hope I am, I really want to bring these conditions, the conditions that I had, to the present staff. Right now, there is a tremendous amount of stress in the schools. Students in the high school reported, 75% of them are reporting stress and depression. And I think this is also reflected in our staff because of the pressure of test-based accountability. And I think we need to rein back a little bit and empower more bottom-up decision-making on the basis of the staff, so that they have more ability to adjust the curriculum to the needs of their students. So, thank you for listening.
Very much. Thank you. And Sarah Stout.
I am running for school committee because I care about kids, I care about education, and I care about Brookline. And I also care about seniors. I can care about kids and seniors at the same time. I'm tired of attempts to pit two of our most vulnerable populations against each other. I support measures to help seniors on fixed incomes pay their property taxes, including the senior circuit breaker warrant in front of town meeting. I would encourage that I support more, building more, low income and affordable housing. And I can talk about that more, but I'm going to back to the school committee. We have 6 candidates. Here is what I have to uniquely offer. First, if elected, I will be the only school committee member with experience at Brookline High beyond being a parent or student. Second, I'm a parent leader across the K-8s. And finally, I've been a professional school consultant, including for Brookline schools. 19 years ago, before any of my 3 children were in any school, I was a member of a Harvard consulting team working with Brookline High to address its achievement gaps. Based on our team report, BHS started the African American and Latino Scholars Program. It developed institutional supports for students of color enrolled in honors or advanced courses. With my own kids at Brookline High, I've been a member of the BHS School Council for 5 years, as well as on the advisory board for the Brookline Parent Education Network. I've been supportive of the BHS Mindful Initiative and the new health and wellness class for 11th and 12th graders. We have worked hard to let families know the high school wants students to manage stress, to balance school, extracurriculars, family, and fun. Second, I'm a parent leader across the K-8s. At Driscoll, I founded and ran for 9 years Science Solstice, a day where the whole school takes a break from its regular schedule to do just science. I collaborate with parent leaders across the district. I coordinate Brookline Talks, a speaker series on raising resilient, courageous, and independent children. This is just a bit of what I've done for Brookline schools. I will bring this commitment and knowledge to school committee. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Spritz.
Hi, my name is Nathan Spritz, and thank you for sponsoring this event today with BCAN, and thank you all for coming and listening. But I want to make another thanks to you. So I have 2 kids in the Brookline schools right now, 2 kids at Baker, and my kids cost a lot of money, but our community gives my kids and all the kids that go to Brookline schools a really priceless gift. And I thank you, I really do thank you. 17% of the households in Brookline have kids in the schools at any one time. The other 83% help to support the schools. And in this room, I really do thank you for the gift that you're giving my kids. But it's a gift. It's not something that they just get. It's not free. It has a price tag. And I recognize that it has a price tag. And that's why when the select board was looking at the 2 warrant articles, I believe it was 23 and 25, Sue Gradoff's article and Dave Lassocier's article, I went and I spoke in support of them, because I think that the senior circuit breaker is a really important thing to add, because the housing prices in our town are just too high for the statewide average circuit breaker, tax circuit breaker to kick in. And I also think that Dave's Associates article on land banking can really bring us a new revenue stream that doesn't touch most of us most of the time. So these are two things that we can do to help bring additional revenues into the schools. But there's one other thing that I'd like to do. I'm an actuary by training. I have a big want list. I mean, if you guys want to come talk to me, there's a lot of things I want to do for a school committee. We're going to talk about some of them. But one of the things that I really want to do is help to make sure that our budgeting process and our long-term planning process helps Brookline use our money most efficiently. Everybody in this room, everybody in Brookline deserves a school committee that is responsible, fiscally responsible with your taxpayers. Please vote for me on May 8th. Thank you.
David Perlman.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. I have been living in Brookline since I was 4 years old. I'm a product of the Brookline Public Schools myself. I attended Pierce for preschool. I went to Lincoln for kindergarten and first grade, devotion 2nd through 8th, and then I graduated from Brookline High School in 2000. Professionally, I'm a child welfare law attorney. I represent children and parents in the courtroom on most weekdays. I'm advocating on behalf of children for their health, to put them in a good home, as well as their education. Sometimes I'm in schools meeting with principals and administrators and teachers crafting special education plans. And most of the clients I represent are indigent minorities. They deal with a lot of struggles, financial, also in terms of racism, which still exists to this day, unfortunately. Sometimes it's not as overt as it used to be, but we still have elements of structural racism that remain in our school system. For example, the over-reliance on standardized testing has a profound impact on our students in that they get prematurely tracked. They get separated from their peers at early ages to receive additional tutoring because of the assumption of low expectations for how they would otherwise perform. And I'm concerned about that. I want to give a voice for these children, for their parents, just like I do in the courtroom. I want to do that on school committee. In the courtroom, I can represent clients on an individual basis. On the school committee, I can help work with my colleagues toward enacting policies and procedures that will benefit people at a group level. And that's been one of the inspirations for me to run. So I do ask for your support. I would appreciate your vote on May 8th. Thank you.
Jennifer Monopoly.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Monopoly. I'm a parent of 2 children in the Brookline schools. I have a daughter at Lawrence and a son at Lincoln. I've been a public school teacher for 15 years in both urban and suburban districts, teaching all levels of elementary education. I've held leadership roles and written curriculum in districts I've worked in, worked with site council and leadership team, been a lead teacher and worked in the National Endowment for the Humanities Summer Institutes. I have a master's in science education, and my family moved here for the great community and diversity in Brookline, as well as for the great schools. Our children have long academic careers ahead of them, and I'm very passionate about public education. I'm an invested community member, and I'm very excited about running for school committee. I would like to bring, and I'm interested in bringing some new voice to the school committee. I think it's really important to listen to community voices and to work on issues in our schools, including principal turnover, policy issues, curriculum, protecting recess, and resolving our enrollment issues in the 9th school. I'm very interested in transparency and process, focusing on teaching the whole child through a comprehensive curriculum that makes sure there's time for science and social studies and the arts, supporting teachers in this work through interdisciplinary work, and also quickly, sustainably, and equitably dealing with our enrollment issues, as well as working on racial justice and equity. I'm Jennifer Monopoly. I'm asking for your vote, but I'm also asking for your voice on May 8th.
Thanks. And next, Barbara Scotto.
Excuse me, my name is Barbara Scotto. I am the only incumbent running this year for the school committee. I have been around in Brookline for a very long time. My 2 children grew up here and went to devotion school. My daughter, in fact, was in the original BEEP program, where I started out my career in the Brookline schools as the BEEP librarian. I have degrees both in library science and in education. When I retired in 2006, I had been teaching at Driscoll School. I taught a little bit at Baker, and then went to Driscoll School. I had been teaching at Driscoll School for many years. And the reason I decided to run was at that point in time, there was no teacher's voice on the school committee. And I felt that that was a perspective that was needed. When you have a teacher's view and a voice on the school committee, you look at things in different ways. Almost everything that comes up, you can look at through the lens of the teacher. You can also look at it through the lens of the child. I'll give you an example. You wouldn't think the parking plans would be something that you would necessarily think about the teachers. But in fact, when you think about what teachers carry to school each day, people say take public transportation, but the truth of the matter is teachers take a lot of things with them every day. So that's one way I might look through the eyes of a teacher. I also would like to say that I think we need to be clear about the role of the school committee. The school committee makes certain decisions, but much of what we do is provide feedback. I chair the curriculum committee, and there are things that I will provide feedback on, things that I don't like. I don't make those decisions as a school committee member. That is what the administrators and the staff does. We support their work. And
Thank you.
That's important to
Barbara. Now we'll open the question and answer session, and the format will be the same. So please identify yourself when you have a question, when you ask a question, and keep your question short, no longer than 30 seconds. And then each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Jerry? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Janet Gallard. I'm a resident of St. Paul Street and a member of the advisory committee, and I was on the previous override study committee. I think also in 2008, definitely in 2015, and again this year, there's a structural deficit that's been identified, and the override study committees have suggested policy changes, like slightly increasing the class size from 21 to 22, monitoring the materials fee program. I'd like to know what concrete steps each of you would do to address the structural deficit so that we're not constantly hitting the override button. Thank you.
All right, we'll go down the road and we'll start with Sarah Stoughton.
So I just want to be clear. We have gained 1,700 students in the last 10 years. So in order to pay for 1,700 students, since in America most of our money is paid through property taxes, we're going to probably have to raise property taxes. So let me address something about class size. One thing about class size now is before, when you were going to school and when I was going to school, not everybody got to go to school. I talked to someone who said that she had someone in a private school who had cerebral palsy because you couldn't go to school with cerebral palsy. Now you get to go to school with cerebral palsy. We have to take everyone who comes, and legally we have to educate them all. That costs more money than it used to. It also means that we need to have them all together, which means you can't have class sizes of 28 anymore because they're not all kids who can learn really easily like it used to be. They're kids who struggle learning and they need small class sizes to be able to learn better. So let's remember that we're not asking for more per kid. It's because we've had 1,700 more kids.
Thank you. And next, Nathan Spritz.
So I'm just going to continue where Barbara left off because I agree with every word she just said. Not only do we have 1,700 more kids, but we are educating about 200 materials fee students, about 300 METCO students, and I stand absolutely behind our district's policies that we will continue to educate these kids. I will also say that when we take kids that have cerebral palsy, I absolutely believe that we should be educating those kids in inclusive classrooms in the best way possible. We have bigger hearts. We have these things do cost some money, but we have big hearts in this community, and I very much want my kids to grow up in an inclusive community where they see some kids who are different, and they learn how to react to those differences. I'm not really. There is a structural deficit. I agree with you. When we hire young teachers, they step up in salary at 3% a year plus COLA. So this, we have 5% differences, and I hope that David will riff on where I am and just continue.
Now, Mr. Perlman.
We are in a difficult situation in that the town is operating at a structural deficit, and unfortunately as school committee members it's beyond our purview to be able to enact changes on a town-wide basis that could help address that. Nathan and I both serve on town meeting, and we have both voted in the past for warrant articles that help provide tax deferrals for our senior citizens, that lower the interest rates. There is a warrant article that has been proposed by Susan Granoff that will be up for vote this year. So there are certain measures that we can take to try to help defray some of these costs. I have often been a proponent on the MSBA side of consistently applying for MSBA funds for every school project each year. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity to be able to utilize those available revenues, and we ought to be attempting to do so. I think we also have opportunities to engage area universities, perhaps have graduate students come into certain newer programs that are going to be coming on, such as restorative justice, and having those students receive credit in return for working in our schools, and that could help be a way to defray costs.
Jennifer Monopoly.
I think you're going to find a lot of agreement here among our voices. Many of us have spoken previously about being in support of the materials fee program as well as the METCO program. It's going to be very difficult to find programs that we are able to cut. I think that one of the things that is really important for our community is having a long-term strategic plan for maintaining and remodeling and new construction so that everyone can understand what's ahead of us and what's coming so that the town and the community can plan for those things. This also allows us to apply for MSBA funding so that we don't have these projects piling up one on top of another. And also, the idea of exploring other potential tax revenue sources, such as possible commercial development where it's zoned appropriately.
Ms. Scotto.
Thank you. When I started teaching in Baltimore County, I had anywhere from 35 to 42 children in my classroom. And let me tell you, they did not get much individual attention. When I began to teach in Brookline, we had classes of anywhere from 18 to 25. And if we got over 25, we automatically had a paraprofessional put into our classroom. We don't do that anymore because it's a very expensive proposition. It costs money. It's an expensive proposition every time you go over 25. It costs money to educate children. And small class size means that each child gets individual attention in a way that doesn't happen when those sizes creep up. I understand the problem, but the costs will continue to go up. Think about your own budget. The costs go up when you go to the grocery store, and there's nothing you can do much about it.
Mr. Swaine.
So I just want to compliment my colleagues for their argument here. As an administrator in this town, I viewed the METCO program as absolutely sacred to not only the health, but the diversity and the racial health of our school system. And the same with the class size. Teachers cannot do their job if there's more than 26 kids in a classroom. I've experienced that. In fact, I owe my entire career to overcrowding. I was hired at the devotion school because the 4th grade was bursting at the seams. So I'm not in favor of overcrowding, but I'm thankful for it.
All right. Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm George Abbott White, town meeting member for this precinct. I taught 42 years in public school. And my question is, when I was a teacher, the principal was just absolutely essential to quality education. And one of the reasons I really enjoyed coming in every day was the hope that I might run into Mike Welch at Newton South High School. So my question to the folks that want to be on school committee is, we have turned over people lickety-split in this town. I think 2 people, 2 years.
What's your question?
I'd like to know how we're going to keep principals. That's my question.
Thank you.
What's the plan for that?
Okay, so I'm Nathan Spritz, and I didn't know that you started teaching in Baltimore County. I started my schooling in Baltimore County at Livermore Elementary School, and I had one of the best principals. I still look back at my elementary school, and I just loved a principal named Edna Mae Merson. Did you know her? She was a Dr. Merson was just an absolutely fantastic person. You know something? At Baker School, we have another fantastic principal, Dr. Brown. I mean, just an absolutely lovely human being. We have buildings that are overcrowded right now. We have stresses that our administrators ought not to be dealing with. If we can just build our way through so that the buildings and the numbers of students in those buildings are right-sized, we will have jobs that are much more meaningful for these principals. They won't be overloaded with administrative duties. They won't be overloaded with parental duties. They'll be able to engage better with the community. The community will be able to engage better in a hiring practice. And I'm very thankful that Mr. Bott is our new superintendent, and I think our hiring is going to get better. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Pearl.
With the exception of Baker School, not one principal at any of our other schools has been there for more than 2 years. And that speaks to a system-wide failure of some kind. Either we're not hiring the right people, or perhaps more likely, we're not providing them with the support necessary so that they can thrive in their new environment. This is very concerning, and it does merit a lot of exploration to figure out how we can do a better job to make sure that our new principals have adequate mentorship so that they can do a good job. When I was at Devotion, Mr. Kaplan was the principal my entire time there. Shortly after I left, Mr. Dempsey became principal. There was an internal pipeline in which someone who had a lot of administrative experience at the school would then succeed as principal, and I think that's a very effective model that we ought to follow. And we also need to engage the community in making these decisions so that parents, teachers, students themselves have an opportunity to assess every candidate.
Thank you. Ms. Monopoly.
Yes, we definitely have a lot of principal turnover right now in Brookline, and that is very concerning. I think that we really need to have a hiring process that's very inclusive of community voice, that involves more parent and teacher voice, so that we can make sure that people we're hiring are supported by the community, and then when they are hired, that we have a really great way to retain them through a mentoring program. It's my understanding that for many years there were principal retreats and principal professional development where they could support each other, and that hasn't been happening, and that's something I think could be really beneficial. When we have this kind of principal turnover, it's really disruptive for students, for families, and for teachers, and for their work environment. And so we want to make sure we can hire and retain really excellent administrators and retain our educators and have happy families and students.
Thank you. Scott.
Well, we actually now are doing things with mentors and with workshops for principals, professional development. We have very strong principal group currently. But I will say this, First of all, many people applying for principal's jobs have no idea how difficult K-8 school is. They're used to maybe a 3 to 5 school or what have you. Also, if you don't understand the culture of the community, it is hard to be a principal here. We had a principal from Colorado, and we had done a national search. The schools in his community were run in very different ways. We do much better when we look to the people in Brookline and hire them as our principals. We can see that this year. Look at Susie Takladar at Driscoll, which has had difficulty for several years. She came in, they love her there. The same thing is happening at Pierce.
Mr. Swaine?
So I totally agree that having a principal that's a mismatch for your school is often demoralizing and actually bad for not only the children's health, but the staff's health. And we've had a dramatic turnover. My experience as principal here was that I was encouraged by the superintendent to go into a principal leadership program. So I had spent 27 years as a teacher, and I became a principal, and the studies show that when that happens, the trust and the effectiveness of the school is much, much better. So I would suggest that we continue to try to cultivate our talent here. And I know Andrew Bott's willing and able to do that. So if we go in that direction, I think we'll have long-term principals.
Stop.
So, is this working?
Hello? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So because George White asked the question, I'm going to tell a joke. It's the increased enrollment, stupid. So I'm sure George didn't vote for Clinton, but if you remember, it's the economy, stupid. So much of this has to do with enrollment. We've had an increase so that principals started out, Driscoll, they started out with 400 students, now it's 600 students. That's a different school she started working for. We had a superintendent, we've had a lot of superintendent turnover. Part of that superintendent turnover comes from the fact that we've had enrollment increase. So many of these things I think will, as Nathan said, once we get the enrollment taken care of, it'll be helpful. One of the things I want to say is I want to follow up with what Barbara said about Mr. Bott, who has said that principals are going to be, that schools that we revolve the central office around principals. The central office there is to support principals, and I think he's done a really great job of appointing principals from inside the central office.
Thanks very much. We've got time, I think, for one more question. I'm looking at the timekeepers.
And we have more, actually. More.
So there's time for one more question.
Hey, Carol Carroll, Precinct 10, and also an advisory committee member. I have an interest in the amount of involvement that our candidates have had in town elections. And I would like to hear from all of them if they are people who vote in town elections on a regular basis.
We'll start with, I think, Mr. Pearl, is it your turn? Yeah, thanks.
I vote in just about every election, including town elections. I've missed a couple here or there, but by and large, I vote almost every time. I certainly always vote in state elections, federal elections, and most town elections, like I said. In addition to that, I've been a town meeting member for 4 years. I always attend the fall town meeting votes. I always attend the spring votes. I attend various other meetings throughout the year. I've been actively engaged in Brookline for many years. I'm one of the youngest town meeting members. I'm very proud of that. I want to remain engaged. That's one of the reasons I'm running for school committee. I feel that it's a natural extension, not just of my professional work as a child welfare attorney, but also based on my experiences as a town meeting member, where I want to expand my representation of my precinct to a town-wide basis, because soliciting the input of constituents is extremely important to me. I really want to ensure that we have an excellent process, that our citizens are very well aware of all the issues, and that they'll always feel heard.
Ms. Monopoly.
So it's been an interesting process running for a townwide office. And I think that it would be great if we could register more people, and if we could have more people on the registered voter list become frequent voters. Between 70 and 93% of Brookline voters are not frequent voters. And so I would love for us to do that. And I think that disenfranchising voters to not allow them to become part of our elected officials is not an effective means for increasing frequent voters. And we want to include as many voices as possible and not exclude voices. Those are not the values of Brookline as I see it. I think that people should vote based on their issues and on their values and for what people stand on and stand up for.
Thank you. Barbara Scully.
Well, as a town meeting member for over 40 years, I don't think I have ever missed voting in a town election because I know how important that is. And I will also say that it is quite important to understand how the process of government works in the town. Because in fact, the Board of Selectmen and the school committee work together on many things and in many ways. And knowing that process is important, and one way to do it is to participate in town, to see what the questions are that we're voting on, who the people are that are running, and what they will bring to the table.
Thanks. Mr. Swaine.
So I view voting as a form of civic participation, and one of my purposes for running is I want my former students to look back and say, look at what Mr. Swaine's doing. This is great stuff, because I think it prolongs your life. I actually think I'm going to grow on the job, so I look forward to that. You might not think that just looking at me, but it's going to happen.
Ms. Delton.
Yeah, so I just looked at my voting record. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but somebody on Facebook told me what it was. I voted in the last 4 of 7 municipal elections, and I admit that I have not always voted when there was no competition, when there were no competitive races, which I feel like I probably should have done. I feel kind of badly about that. But where I come from is, in the last 5 years, I spend 20 hours a week of my time in the schools. I remember when I said it was just a bit of what I've done? That really is just a bit of what I've done. And now what I want to do is take it to the next level, where I'm getting involved in town politics and really learning. I've learned so much running for this campaign about how the town works. And so where I come from is, I've worked a lot in the schools, I know the parents, I know a ton of teachers, and I really feel like now I'm getting into how does the town politics work and how can I help the school and the town at school committee.
Thanks. Mr. Spritz.
So I'm Nathan Spritz, I'm a town meeting member, as David said before. I have voted 5 out of the last 7 times. Thank you, Neil Gordon, for letting everybody know that. And I've also gone to many, many, many meetings. I'm a tired puppy some days. If you see me dragging and I don't recognize you, it's because I'm going to fall asleep on my feet. Some of these meetings go really late. Barbara spends God knows how many hours in school committee meetings. And we're all signing up to do that. But some of us have done this already. And I mean, there's just so much work to go on in this town. There's so much work to support seniors. There's so much work to support kids, but there's also the transportation board. Town meeting members go to these meetings. And it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding work. And I agree with Mr. Swaine. I may grow tired, but man, I feel a whole lot better because of all this work, so thank you.
Okay, thanks. We've really come to the end of the question period. And we're moving to closing statements. Or do we have enough time?
We've got 7 minutes.
We've got 7 minutes? Okay, everybody has to talk fast. We'll take one. Carol, you just had a question. I don't think we're structured to do follow-ups.
And this man has had his hand up for a long time. Where's Jerry? Oh.
We're going to have closing statements.
And we have to have closing statements. So, yes, so you have 30 seconds to ask your question.
No, quickly. How do we address the racial problem in this town, in the schools, with the school committee in particular? I thought the way Superintendent Bott was hired by the school committee was atrocious. I think the fact that Adrian Mims was not hired as the headmaster of Brookline High School is atrocious. It starts right here with the school committee. And how do you think we can solve that?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, I think your question's clear. We're starting now with Jennifer Monopoly.
I very much agree that we need increased transparency in hiring process and decision-making at the school committee level. And I think that we need to hire and retain educators and administrators of color. I think that we need to have, we need work in curriculum about increasing and understanding, students' understanding and conversation about race and equity. I think we need to work on closing the access and equity, access and opportunity gap for our students in our school, and I think there's real and significant work to be done in that area in our Brookline schools, and we need to be able to have courageous conversations. And if adults can't have those courageous conversations, it's very difficult for children to have those conversations.
Ms. Scott.
Clearly, racism is an issue in this country, not only in Brookline. And it is very important in schools that we engage students in these conversations about race. And that, in fact, we have a very diverse faculty. That's not as easy to get as one might think. Brookline is not necessarily a place people of color want to live. And that was told to me by the African-American father of a young woman who decided to settle in Washington because she was more comfortable there. Also, it is difficult to hire teachers of color because many of them would like to work in a community like Boston where they are working with more children of color. So we have issues around this and we need to work to solve them. The school committee has been doing that, as has Superintendent Bott. We are also working with the high school and with the Medco program. The Medco director, Keith Lozama, in fact, was a former student of mine in 5th grade.
Thanks very much, Barbara. Okay, Mr. Swaine.
Thank you for that question, Arthur. I think we are very aware that there's racism in the school system. There's structural racism that exists in how we track kids, and tracking in general is, I think, a racist process. I also think the MCAS is inherently racist. It categorizes kids. But I think we also have to start confronting our white privilege. And the only way to get at meaningful action is to examine your white privilege and take action when you see racism. So I hope we could go in that direction.
Stoughton.
Yeah, so I met Arthur Conquest in 1999 when he was a member of the African American Achievement Committee, which I worked on. And so, Mr. Conquest, I understand your frustration. And I do want to say that I do think, having seen it now for 20 years, sort of on and off, that it's gotten better. That when I was there 20 years ago and I did interviews, what I was told at BHS is we can't talk about race at BHS. It's too confrontational, we all blow up. What now, I feel like BHS teachers are able to talk about race, and I think that's good. There were the comments about the videos that came out. My guess is 20 years ago, that would have been covered up in Brookline. I think it's a good thing that it wasn't covered up. So one thing I want to say is, and I'm adding to what Jim said, is how are we going to do this? The first thing we need to do is we need to train our white teachers on anti-racism in how to teach anti-racism in their classes and how to teach social justice in their classes and how to work with people of different races. Until we do that, we will not be able to have our staff more diverse.
Thanks. Mr. Perlman. Mr. Spritz. Yeah.
So Mr. Conquest, if you don't mind, can I hijack half the question and talk about achievement gaps, or do you want everything about hiring? Your choice.
No, you answer the question the way you...
Okay, thank you. So I want to be really quick about this one. If we don't hire, if we don't achieve the diverse outcomes that we as a community demand, we have to hire somebody in central administration and make it their job and actually grade them on their job for making improvements. That's the only way things happen. But for achievement gaps, I am sick and tired, and I'm sorry about this, of calling things by other names, by calling them opportunity gaps, by saying that the MCAS is racist. There might be some parts of the test that maybe turn out that they don't work as well for people of color. But if we don't keep this data set going and keep a spotlight on the fact that we are not teaching in this country, not just Brookline, but in this country, kids of color as well as white kids, we are never going to fix it, and we need to keep this data set going. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Mr. Perlman.
I appreciate this question because my professional life is essentially dedicated to many of these issues of advocating on behalf of racial minorities, the vast majority of my clients. And as to the situation in our schools, while I appreciate Nathan's comment about the achievement gap, I am more concerned about the opportunity gap because many of our minorities do not have the same resources at home available to them as those of us who are white and are born into better circumstances from our good fortune. And consequently, we need to provide better wraparound services so that minorities are on an equal footing with respect to their opportunity to services and to all of the different resources that our schools can provide. So I think it's extremely important that we not just look for diversity in name only in terms of who we hire, but that we actually address at a systemic level the structural racism in place in our schools so that we have the correct policies in place, so that our students are treated equitably, so that our students are on equal footing for access.
Thanks. Okay, that brings it around, right? Okay. It's time for closing statements. And you had a chance to speak, didn't you, Ms. Gamble, to that question?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes,
good.
I did.
Good. Anyway, it's closing statements. Each of you has 30 seconds. Okay? All right. And the sequence will be ballot order. So we'll start with Ms. Scotto.
What I support for the Brookline schools is education, is excellence and equity for all students. I would like to see classrooms where there were students, where students could find other children who looked like them and who didn't look like them, who spoke different languages or spoke the same language, who were from different cultures or from the same culture. We are educating children for the 21st century, and we need to be very clear that that only comes about when we accept all these differences.
Ms. Manalo.
Thank you all for coming today and for listening. We're all in this together, and there are many things that benefit schools and also benefit seniors. Designing age-friendly parks makes them better for everyone. Safe, affordable, senior-friendly streets make the streets safer and better for students going to and from schools. Good schools increase our property values, and property tax relief for seniors for whom it is a hardship makes sense. People move here for the schools, but people also come here and stay here for its age friendliness. Oh,
thanks very much, Mr.
I think it's important to look at the respective skill sets that each candidate can bring onto school committee. And in my case, it is my job to be a voice for children and for parents. And that's something that there's a perception of that is lacking in this community. So if you vote for me, and I hope you do on May 8th, I can be that voice for our children and for our parents. It's what I do in the courtroom, it's what I'll do on the school committee, so please vote for me on May 8th.
Thanks. Mr. Spritz.
So thank you again for the precious gift, the truly precious gift that all of our kids here in Brookline receive. They're only, 6 to 18 once, and I think that there's no community in the country that does better with our kids during that time period. Please vote for me on May 8th. If anybody here wants to talk to me, I will stick around. I'll give you my phone number. I will always be available before and after the election. Thank you.
Ms. Dowsett.
I hope that my words and thoughts have convinced you to vote for me on May 8th. I've been a parent leader at this high school, Driscoll, and across the K-8s. As a professional, I addressed racial and economic disparities for over 20 years. This is what I will bring to school committee: commitment, experience, knowledge, and an eagerness to gain all three. To close, I want to share 2 mantras I picked up on my 19-year journey with the Brookline Public Schools. First, assume good intent. Even when others appear crazy or evil, assume good intent. And second, never forget.
Thank you.
All our kids are counting on all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Swaine.
I want to thank you all for paying such close attention. I am a career educator, and I spent my entire career here in Brookline. And not to be, I want to say it was a joyful experience for me. And I felt that I grew as a teacher. I became actually what I thought was the best teacher possible. And I want to make sure that we have the conditions so that all staff members and all kids can learn at the highest level.
All right. Thank you very much.